What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It's a brand new episode of Liam Picks Fights, and we're coming at you live talking about UFC Vegas 60. Very interesting card that we've got today, and I'm excited to break it down. We got Cory Sandhagen taking on Song Yadong in probably the premier division right now in the UFC, this bantamweight division. We got New York on top. Aljamain Sterling claimed the throne, but guys, it's a very competitive division overall, and we've got two killers squaring off in that main event. So it's a real hardcore fans delight today. We've got a ton of action fights. We got a ton of violent fights. I'm expecting a lot of finishes. I'm expecting a lot of interesting style clashes. So without further ado, we're going to break down the card like we always do from the bottom to the top. Just want to say thank you off the top to the two sponsors of this show. PrizePicks, first and foremost, my first sponsor. They got behind me early. So if you guys are interested in trying to take on these prop projections, trying to take on DFS projections, but maybe not trying to play into one of those huge fields, it's another way to get involved. It's very simple. You use my promo code Liam. They'll deposit match you 100% up to $100. All the information you need is in the description below. And also Oddsjam. And I'm going to use the Oddsjam tool as we go through here, just so I'm getting access to the best odds, because if you're not shopping for odds and you do this all the time, you're just going to leave money on the table. If I could get somebody for plus 165 on one book, why would I not take that if I'm getting plus 150 or plus 145 on all the other books? It kind of makes sense to shop around for lines. And there's a lot of places that offer great lines, but Oddsjam, one of the simplest tools out there. You could use it to target your specific state as well. So I'm only having access to New York sports books and Jersey sports books if I'm willing to take that little bit of a drive. So for me, it's good to switch back and forth, see where I can get the best odds, and then act accordingly. So starting with the very first fight of the night, guys, we're going to be breaking this one down in the lightweight division. And this is a guy who just fought at 170 pounds in Cameron VanCamp, and he lost in the very first round to Andre Fialho, but that was a welterweight fight. He's fought as low as 145 in his career before, but as of his recent bouts, he's been fighting at 170. So he's clearly a much bigger guy. These guys stood next to each other. He was towering over his opponent, Nicholas Moda, and Moda kind of lost in pretty decisive fashion in his UFC debut. But the difference there, he fought like 30 plus fight UFC veteran Jim Miller, southpaw, tricky striking, very hard low kicks, and also just a better counter boxer than Moda, with more sophistication from that southpaw stance. So that was a bad matchup for Moda. I actually bet Jim Miller inside the distance. I had Jim Miller knockout round one, didn't cash for me, but very close, right? He gets him to start that second round. So for me, that was not a great matchup for Moda. I think this is a much better matchup for Moda. I don't love the size disparity. I don't love the fact that, right now, according to Oddsjam, the best available price on Nicholas Moda is minus 146 on Pinnacle, sharpest sports book out there. So they're trying to get back some action on the Moda side. Seems like the market's coming in very heavy on VanCamp. And listen, VanCamp could definitely win this fight by knockout. He could definitely try and pursue some takedowns here. But I think that Moda, he's been around very high level fighters in the lead up to this. He's been doing the right kind of work. He's been putting in a lot of time in the game, and neither one of these guys just has a bankable chin, in my opinion. That's the problem. He does show 3 losses by knockout. Both these guys have been finished 3 or more times in their career. So there's a lot of red flags here, but it does point me to the fight's probably not going the distance. I think this fight probably ends inside the distance. I think that I would have to favor Moda here to probably find the knockout, but it's just not a fight that I want to be caught, overextending on, because I think both these guys are somewhat suspect and maybe don't project so high in the UFC based on what we've seen from them so far, and their age and everything else. So it'd be interesting to see what improvements they can make here leading into the fight, but not a fight that I have tremendous interest in betting on. So the next fight that we will discuss is in the bantamweight division. So another fight from that featured division, and this is an interesting one as well. Javid Basharat clearly hasn't faced the same level of competition as somebody like Tony Gravely, who's been around the game for a long time. I've been showing this all week. First ever MMA event I went to in person. You can see there, Tony Gravely, also my boy Sean Felton. So shout out Sean Felton if he's watching the show, but got a lot of wrestling rounds in with Sean. So I went out to that King of the Cage event and saw Patchy Mix get the first round submission, wrapped up that neck, beautiful guillotine choke. That's when I knew I was a Patchy Mix fan for life. And that's when I knew that this man, Patchy Mix, could grapple. But I'll tell you what, you look through the record of Tony Gravely, it's happened to him a number of times, and he's fought a lot of great fighters, so it's no surprise he's lost some of those fights. But a lot of times when he gets in there with a really talented grappler, he puts his head in bad positions. He likes to wrestle a little bit with that bent over stance, and that can open you up for guillotine chokes, front chokes. So that, I think, is a little bit of a problem. Also, I was impressed by what I've seen from Javid Basharat. Trevin Jones, he's a black belt, I believe. I know he's a very talented grappler. I know he has grappling credentials. I know he's won a lot of fights by submission on the regional scene. And I have seen him outlast a lot of guys. Like Trevin Jones doesn't always look like he's, winning the fight, but he normally can outlast somebody and then make that surprising comeback in round 3. No dice. Like Javid Basharat was on top of him. Really broke him down with pace, with pressure. I was impressed by that. And he's training with all the right guys. So Tony Gravely, he has been training with the right guys. He's been putting in work in American Top Team. He's fought in every regional organization under the sun and really proven that this is his life. This is what he's about. He's really trying to make a career as a fighter. So all credit to him. But I do think this is a categorical step up as well for him. Simon Oliveira, was basically guillotine or bust in that spot. He didn't really have much success, whereas I think Javid could really threaten on the feet here. I don't think he's just resigned to the grappling, but I also think his grappling is, dangerous and improving. So I'm not banking on Javid here. I don't have any bets on this fight yet either, but I would definitely lean towards the Javid side. I'm looking right now. According to our friends at Oddsjam, Javid Basharat could be had for -164 on FanDuel Sportsbook. The comeback on Tony Gravely could be as high as +150 on Caesar Sportsbook. So really, you got a lot of options. If you're looking to get involved on a money line here, I'd say both of those are playable type of lines. So, if you've got strong confidence one way or the other, you could back your guy. I think that there's a decent enough chance that either of these fighters could win inside the distance. Tony Gravely, sometimes he has those controlling wrestling performances, but a lot of times, he's either dominating or he's having a little bit of a tougher time and he's potentially getting finished. Nate Maness, he had him badly hurt and rocked, and then he allowed that window for Nate Maness to come back, even with a broken jaw. So I think that, Tony Gravely sometimes loses focus in his fights as well. That creates opportunities for finishes. But when he's on, he's throwing hammers. He hits very hard. And we've seen that in recent performances as well. That Nate Maness fight, a lot of referees stopped that fight in the first round. So I think that Tony Gravely's got big power. This is a real test for Javid, but I personally believe that Javid's going to get the job done. And I think, maybe a late TKO for the Javid side. I could see him just wearing him down, sprawl and brawl, trying to keep it upright, but, punishing him with elbows and submission attempts when he's on the bottom. And then, maybe getting that top position late in the fight. That's kind of how I see it going down for Javid. Maybe he uses a guillotine attempt to sweep, something like that. But I think it's going to be a heck of a fight. And, I could see either one of these guys projecting a little bit higher up in the division. If Tony Gravely is able to shore up some of his defensive liabilities, the guy's got a lot of athletic upside and a ton of very relevant pro experience. So just wanted to make those notes here as we move to the next fight on the card, where we've got Maria Agapova. One of the biggest upsets in UFC history, Shayna Dobson getting the job done, outlasting Maria Agapova. Then the market flips all the way the other way. They got the other chick favored. Maria Agapova goes out there, styles on the Sabina Mazos of the world, really did a lot of damage on the feet. If you look at her record, you'll see that she has 2 submission wins, in the UFC. And it's, it's not just like she's a grappler or something, right? It's like she is a person with good finishing instincts is what I would say, right? She gets you hurt and you could be really tough and take a lot of punches to the face and keep moving. But if you get locked up in that choke, you know what I'm saying? You can't tough guy your way out of a choke. You're going to sleep. And that's what I like about chokes. And that's what I like about people that go for them. So I think that what I kind of had my eye on in this spot was, what about the fight ends by sub? You're looking and you're seeing Jillian Robertson to win by sub is like +165. I mean, that's a disgusting number, right? Those are the kind of numbers that look like, Gunnar Nelson against Takashi Sato, where he has 15 minutes of back control and doesn't end up getting the finish. You know what I'm saying? So I don't love the number that I'm seeing on that Jillian Roberts submission price. However, you're not paying much more. It's plus money for the fight ends by sub. You got a chick on the other side with 2 wins by sub. Even if she hurts Jillian on the feet, which is everybody's theory of the fight, if Maria Agapova was to win this, she's going to have to use her striking. All right, no problem. Then what is she going to do? Not use the chokes that she's been using in the last couple fights? I mean, Jillian's obviously going to try and defend that more. She's going to do a better job, hand fighting and these kind of things. But if you're rocked, you're rocked. And if you're hurt, you're hurt. And if you want out, you want out. And I think that, we could definitely see Agapova get the win by sub here and turn some heads if she's able to hurt Jillian Robertson. I'm just going to peek over at the market and see what that is. Agapova by submission. Yeah. It's so funny that I say that, and then I look and the line's being bet down on Agapova by sub. It was as high as plus 3,000 on Unibet, and it is now plus 1,050. So, that's a pretty big movement. It looks like it moved off one bet, so somebody hammered that, and Unibet respected it. I'm looking right now. Robertson inside the distance is being hit down to the plus 115 type number. So really those Robertson numbers are getting a little bit harder to play here. But I do think that Robertson, if she gets it on the ground, she is much better. So if she's not hurt, I do think she's going to have opportunities to style potentially on Agapova. But Agapova just strikes me as more athletic, a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more of a natural fighter. So if she's able to do some damage and hurt her, maybe that's the path, to a big upset here for Agapova. But, the thing that's not in her favor, just as we leave here to move to the next fight, I'm looking on Oddsjam plus 133 on Pinnacle Sportsbook right now, the best available comeback on the Agapova side. So you never want Pinnacle to be hanging in the bait on the best number against your fighter if you can help it. Shout out to my man Wiz, says shout out my boy Liam, realist in the game. Appreciate you, my brother. Got to get the panel back together soon. I've been having all sorts of tech difficulties. Looking forward to this week off to try and make some improvements to my office as well as my connection, as well as my laptop situation. So just excited to get back on the horn with everybody. Appreciate you guys. Sharpest chat in the game. Want to shout you guys out. We got 83 plus people rocking with us live right now. Library cards are working. Pull up. Coach says, let's get it. And MMA Asphalt as well. Basharat brothers coming through. They're out there taking pictures with the ambassador from Afghanistan. I saw that too. And I was like, man, seems like they got the connect. So, all very interesting information, guys. And we move here to the next fight. We got Trey Ogden taking on Daniel Zellhuber. And this is one of the first fights that I have some action on, right? Daniel Zellhuber, I expected to see a guy who's very talented based on what I was hearing. And that's what I saw. I think that he's got very good technical skills on the feet. He's an unfinished product, right? He's very young, but I do think that he projects much higher in his UFC career than somebody like Trey Ogden, right? We see Trey Ogden go out there and he's going with the Jordan Levitts of the world, struggling in the stand-up department, getting chewed apart by leg kicks. Didn't seem like he had that tremendous grappling upside and takedown upside. So I think that that's a problem, if you're going against Zellhuber. And what I think is probably the most likely outcome here is that Zellhuber is going to be hurting him on the feet and force a bad shot out of Trey Ogden. And Trey Ogden shows 3 losses in the very first round by submission. So I had to have me a little poke at that Zellhuber by sub in round 1. It was plus 2,200 on FanDuel. I'm not sure what it is right now. Let me check. We've got Zellhuber by sub in round 1. The current odds for Zellhuber by sub in round 1, it's plus 2,400. So yeah, you could still get that price out there. And I think that that's very interesting to me. Just that number is sitting out there for the basically like number 1 losing condition for this fighter. And you look at his record, right? It's not replete with subs. You're not seeing a ton of submission wins. But what I would argue is that you're seeing, these very fancy, impressive wins, the calf slicer, a triangle choke from the bottom. It shows that he has skills, but he prefers to strike. If this guy is going to try and force him into a grappling match, I don't think he's going to be a fish out of water. I don't think he's going to just get run over on the mats. So I think that Zellhuber is live to win the fight by any method, decision, KO, or submission. And so because the submission's a huge plus number, and I saw, what I thought were real technical skills, I was willing to take a shot. So, I played that sub one price, like I mentioned, and just it's not a huge bet for me, but it's a huge potential return. So willing to take the shot with this kid that I think's got a lot of talent. Next up on the board, a fight that I don't have a tremendous interest in betting, but I do think that a lot of people are very bullish on the dog here. I just got to come clean and say I bet Ryan Amanda against her on the Contender Series because I wasn't all that impressed. I do think she has power for WMMA. And what I will say is I thought she was much more impressive on the Contender Series in the sense that she was still making weird decisions in the striking, but she does have power. She can fight through the 15 minutes. She was able to keep the fight upright, and she's training with Jessica Andrade. She's training with Pirane Valetudo. So there are some plus things to like about her. However, Loma Lookboonmee, she's a bit undersized for the division, but she does have a lot of competition experience in championship Muay Thai and these kind of martial arts. And I think that what I see from Loma is her clinch striking is very technical. It's very good. I think she'll be able to compete with Denise Gomes in the clinch. She's going to be at near, size parity in this fight. The strength advantage, I do think, is going to go the Denise Gomez way here, ever so slightly. But I think the technicality in the clinch and the fact that Denise Gomez is coming off of a fight very recently, she's doing a rapid turnaround here. And we've seen a lot of people underperform in those kind of spots. I think of Lupi Godinez against Luana Carolina, where she was making a quick turnaround, seemed like she had a lot of momentum, and it all just came screeching to a halt because she was doing a little bit too much too soon. The UFC is asking for a quick turnaround here. She's a Contender Series fighter. She says, sure. I think she could definitely win the fight, but based on the context of the matchup, I would prefer the Loma Lookboonmee side. I haven't played it for anything outside of a $10 free bet parlay. I think I included her in, but yeah, I really don't feel extremely bullish on the Loma side here. According to our friends at Oddsjam right now, -200 on the Loma Lookboonmee side on Pinnacle Sportsbook, best available, whereas you got a +185 comeback on the Denise Gomes side. So for me, kind of just keeping steady Eddie here, not trying to overextend on some of these fights where I don't have the strongest read. If anything, I'll wait, try and see what the market tells me, do a little bit of market research, kind of see where money's coming in late and maybe fade it because recently we've been seeing a lot of these late moves as kind of fakes in mixed martial arts. So just something to pay attention to potentially as we move forward. Now, the next fight up on the card, Trevin Giles and Louis Cosi. Another fight that I can't be extremely confident in, right? You got one of my favorite guys to fade in the UFC, unfortunately, has been Trevin Giles, right? Part of that's been matchmaking, but also part of that's been I don't really believe in Trevin Giles' skill set necessarily. He tends to keep his hands down. I don't like that about fighters that also keep their chin up because it kind of leaves them exposed. And while I don't think Louis Cosi is a world beater, I'm not sure that he's the next big prospect coming up in the UFC or anything like that, but he does swing absolute bungalows, and he's taken some time off here. His first fight in the UFC was a greasy fight. He obviously spent himself early looking for the finish, had nothing left, blew up in the faces of a lot of people that bet on him. So there's going to be some anti-Louis Cosi sentiments this week for sure. But for me, I didn't lay anything significant on him last time. I did see that, he was taking a beating, right? He was starting to get beat up. He was clearly exhausted after 3 minutes. And he didn't quit. He was still in the fight. He was going for nut shots. If you're not cheating, you're not trying. He's doing everything he can to stay in the fight and win. And for me, those are the kind of things, the attributes I look for in an underdog. Trevin Giles, on the other hand, cutting down to 170, that could be a blessing and a curse, right? We've seen a lot of guys make that big 15-pound cut. Really compromises their chin. Even the 10-pound cut. I remember I bet on, Kevin Kroom. Real bad one for me, boys. Ladies and gentlemen, I should say. But yeah, that was an absolutely horrific bet by me. And it's because he came down in weight. I thought he might carry some of those attributes, the length, the this, but the problem is you cut too much weight, you really can compromise your chin. And I didn't think that, I think Michael Morales, a talented prospect. I didn't think he was landing his best punches on Trevin Giles. I just think Trevin Giles' ability to take the punches wasn't necessarily there. So we'll see if he's made the requisite changes and improvements here. I don't think Cosi is like, the next Golden Gloves boxing champion either. But he did get his brown belt in the time he's been away. He does have a competitive wrestling background. And so those are the kind of things that make me think that he's a live underdog in this spot. But I will also shout out my man, John Anik, who says the ABCs, always bet on cardio. In the sport of MMA, that is a very, a very live proposition. So, I think that Cosi is live here. I think he could finish Giles early, but the longer the fight goes, the more greasy it becomes, the more it becomes anybody's fight. And potentially Giles can pick him off here because Giles has slowed down historically in third rounds and really given them away, given fights away, gotten finished. But I don't know that Kosi's necessarily the guy who could push that pace. So could make it an interesting dynamic where, if the finish doesn't happen early, all the people on the under and the fight not to go the distance are puking as both guys are just gassed, leaning into each other against the fence and that kind of thing. So that's the one error of caution I would give. But I do think that this fight should end inside the distance. I think it should end very early. I just haven't bet those unders personally because they seem extremely popular. Seems like people want to, take the path of least resistance here, not line up with either side and look for that easy money on the fight not to go. And it probably cashes, but it's just the one thing that's keeping me from taking the swim with everybody else. So next up, we got a very interesting fight here. And my man Locker Room, shout out Pub Sports Radio, going to be hopping on with the boys live to talk about the fights later. So you're going to want to check that out as well because you never know what live bets we'll add. And, we go crazy when we win, but we tend to do better together. So let's see this matchup. And it's a good one. Damon Jackson, Pat Sabatini, 145 pounds. You got two guys that have really competed at the highest levels regionally. And now it's about who's going to take that big step forward in the UFC. And I think that this is a big fight. It's a meaningful fight. It's a good fight. But I also got to, unfortunately, go the other way here. I do not have any bets on this fight yet. But my lean is actually towards Pat Sabatini to win this fight and to get it done inside the distance. And I'll break down for why I feel that way. Number one, these guys from Martinez BJJ have been doing an excellent job since they came to the UFC in terms of game planning, in terms of knowing what to do, and in terms of, putting on performances. I've seen they can win decisions. They can grit it out. They can go through difficult times. And when they're hurt, they're still dangerous. These are the kind of things that I admire about them. This is the things that I really like. When I look at Damon Jackson, he's very talented and he's a very good grappler. He's got excellent cardio. He's surprised me a number of times already in the UFC, which is the only reason I didn't lay a large amount of money on Pat Sabatini here, right? I've kept my hands off this fight so far. But what I like about Pat is that he does come from a martial arts background. He does have very crisp kicks. He does have good tools at range. And when he decides to close the distance, he does so in an educated manner. He can normally get to sophisticated jiu-jitsu positions. He doesn't just have one note where he has to go for a double leg. He has to go for a single. He can go for a variety of takedown attempts. He can also attempt a variety of submissions. You look at the TKO loss for Pat Sabatini. I point this out every time I break down his fights. It's actually a submission loss. He got a little bit complacent, lost focus, and got his arm snapped. Outside of that, Pat has really been nails for some time now. He's a very difficult guy to beat. He's a gamer. He comes with a very good game plan, typically for his fights. And like I said, in the Jamal Emmers fight, we see that heart. He gets hurt early on. Jamal Emmers thinks he's got a path to a toehold, and Pat shows him there's levels to the jiu-jitsu and really tears his knee apart with a very high-level heel hook. So I think this is a hell of a fight. I think this is a hell of a scrap. The idea of laying the minus 180, 190 on the money line against Damon Jackson, that's not been working out well for people, right? Damon Jackson's been taking people for their dollars a little bit. But I'll also say he's shown what I would say is vulnerability. Like Charles Rosa had a path to winning that fight, but Charles Rosa couldn't help but go for these sub attempts when they're both bleeding all over the place and just keep falling over the top and giving up bottom position. And I don't see that from Pat. I do think that Pat is a much better control grappler than somebody like Charles Rosa. And I do think that he's going to be able to defend any submissions that Damon brings to the table here. But it's a hell of a fight. You'd be crazy to think that Damon Jackson doesn't have a chance because he brings that cardio. He brings that gamer attitude. He doesn't give a shit who somebody is. He's coming to bring the same intensity every time. So I think it's a hell of a fight, and I'm excited to see this one play out. But I got to ride with the Beast Coast. CFFC, baby. Stand up. Pat Sabatini. That's my pick, but I'm rooting for my man Mills. He's got that money line play, and I don't got nothing. So shout out to my man Mills in the chat. Appreciate you, locker room. Now, next fight up on the card, folks. We've got Anthony Hernandez. Fluffy. I swear, I thought watching live that John Anik broke when he submitted Adolfo Vieira. I thought for sure that he said, Anthony fucking Hernandez. But he claims to this day it was Fluffy. It just sounded like the F-bomb on TV. But boy, oh boy, that was something, huh? Adolfo Vieira, all the jiu-jitsu heads, my jiu-jitsu heads who are watching ADCC and not this show right now, they know what's up. Adolfo Vieira is the goods. So Fluffy Hernandez, to survive the positions he was in, the head and arm chokes, the mount, right? All these really dominant spots from Adolfo Vieira, work his way through and get to the top position. For me, that showed a ton of growth, showed a lot of maturity. But also, the one thing I'll say is giving up those positions is extremely dangerous in MMA because not everybody's going to treat it like jiu-jitsu and try and wrap up some chokes and get the armbar. They might pound your head in if you put yourself in bad positions. And I certainly think that, aside from that Jordan Wright submission last time out, this kind of guy like Marc-Andre Barrios is looking to pound your head in. He's just looking to throw a lot of shots. He's looking to be active with his volume. He's looking to get off and be aggressive, But personally, I can't get on the Marc-Andre Barrios side. I know that the line's tempting. I know that it's getting very high up there in terms of that money line price. I think he's as high as plus 200 in some spots, but I think that the UFC really likes this Fluffy Hernandez guy. I think that he's very tough. I think he's a gamer. You go back and watch when he was on the sauce. Shout out USADA. They let our boy know, but when he was on the sauce, he absolutely sent Jordan Wright in the first round. And I know that Jordan Wright gets some grief, but sometimes he's had to curl up because he took a bunch of big shots. He got hit. He got put out bad by Fluffy. That was a horrific knockout. One of the best knockouts on the Contender Series in recent years. And additionally, he's come to the UFC and he's had very impressive performances. He's shown he can go to the decision as well. So for me, the market is the one thing that's scaring me about this fight. Let me introduce the odds here. Shout out to the people in the chat who let me know I hadn't said that yet. We got Alexander Hernandez, minus 202, best price on Pinnacle Sportsbook right now. We've got Marc-Andre Barrio, the comeback, plus 180 on BetMGM Sportsbook. Shout out to my man Boston Nick. Shout out to my man 2 Cents in the chat. Appreciate you guys for being here. And 122 rocking with us live. So guys, excited for this fight night. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for being here. But to close out my thoughts on this fight, I think that Marc-Andre Barrio, he has done, much better in recent fights, but I still don't know that I'm buying into, him as a full-on contender in this division. I think that Fluffy projects a little bit higher long-term. I think he's got a more clear process for winning these MMA fights over time. He is a very, very good wrestler. He's a very good grappler in terms of his persistence. He's not going to take a takedown attempt, get stuffed and go, oh, okay, I guess the fight's over and quit. He normally is going to push, and really test the grappling, the cardio. And I think that Marc-Andre Barrio, normally what he brings to the table is an ability to get punched in the face and then outlast people with cardio. So I think it's just going to be tough. It's going to be a hell of a fight if it stays on the feet. I think that would favor Marc-Andre Barrio. But, shout out Pokemon Trainer says, Viva Mexico. I got to go the same way, man. Cain Velasquez, young prototype. Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. I think he's going to get the job done. So rooting for Fluffy here. I'm riding with Fluffy for now, but just some market factors is what I was saying. Just a lot of people seem to be on the fluffy side. So I'd expect the line to keep going up a little bit, but we'll see what happens with late money here. Always interesting to see how the market shapes itself over time, because you got to remember, one thing is like what the odds are, but the other thing is what the limits are. Because if they're taking huge bets, that means it's a sharper line than earlier in the week when it's still flittering around a little bit and there's a lot more volatility. So just something to keep in mind here. And using programs like Oddsjam, you see that movement over the course of the week. It makes it a lot more exemplary. Now, the next fight we've got up is another Canadian, as a matter of fact, and it's in the heavyweight division. A big disparity in weight here is a problem for me, just ever so slightly. But that being said, I like Tanner Boser, man. If you look at my betting record, I bet on Tanner Boser. It's burnt me a couple of times. I thought it was pretty clear he beat Andre Arlovski. That being said, Andre Arlovski has I don't know, a special relationship with the judges. Like, he gets a big purse for the show. I don't know, but this guy is always winning the decision. Like Jake Collier takes him down in the final few seconds. Doesn't matter. Like, I really don't think that people get a fair shake against Arlovski. That being said, Tanner Boser, what's the problem with Tanner Boser? What did I come away from that fight thinking? Did I just come away feeling sorry for myself? No. I came away thinking Tanner Boser's not aggressive enough. He does not throw his hands enough. He is not trying to hurt people with his hands enough. Every time between fights, he is saying he is going to try to hurt people more with his hands. He's going to try to get after it more. He's going to try and bring that aggression. And I'm hopeful that this is the kind of fight that he does that, because Rodrigo Nascimento is an uncomfortable striker. I think that's fair to say. I also think Nascimento, he does get better as the fight goes on. But sometimes he doesn't make it to the rest of the fight. It's like, I do think that there's a chance he could check out here. And the one thing that I'll say that's positive about Boser, he's not always getting taken down on the first level change, the first exchange. Ilir Latifi's pretty good at taking people down, man. He took down Derek Lewis. Like, he took down a couple guys. Like, he can really get underneath somebody. He's a big, strong guy, and that's actually all he could do. I think he only landed 6 strikes in that fight, So a lot of these performances have been muted wrestling performances. It's possible that Nascimento is able to, get a hold of him. He is very undersized for the division. So again, that's my hesitation. That's the reason I don't have a Tanner Boser ticket this weekend. He's burnt me before. But in terms of like what this fight looks like at range, I think Boser is much more talented in the boxing. I think he'll probably be slipping a lot of these shots and landing his own. I think he's got more hand speed, and I think he has more variety. I think he'll throw leg kicks. I think he'll get, more creative angles here. It's just hard to trust him at this number, but this is kind of like a do or die spot. And I think Nascimento is a little bit fraudulent personally. And I don't think that he's going to, make it to the top of the division necessarily. He does train with the right guys. He does, seem to put in the work, but he does not seem to me very confident and competent in all positions when he's out there fighting. And I do think that Tanner Boser, it's been a while since he's been grappled. And I don't think he shows any losses by sub as a pro. He's been knocked out once, basically a flash KO in the first couple seconds. Other than that, he's a pretty durable fighter. And the guys that have beaten him have basically beaten him by like holding him chest to chest and like not letting a fight happen. So he's going to be very insistent on trying to make a fight happen here. I'm rooting for Tanner Boser, but I don't think I'm going to get there at the pay window. I just think, Tanner Boser is the person I lean towards in this fight. Seems like Nascimento is another one of these very popular dogs. So, I'm not hating on the community. I'm rooting for everybody, but I just, I don't necessarily see it myself. I haven't been impressed by Nascimento, and, especially in that Badeau fight, he struck me as somebody that's going to be a future fade for sure. So, with that being said, we can move along to the next fight here. Joseph Pyfer taking on Alan Amadovski. And, this is another fight where didn't necessarily want to go hammer the money line because there is some level of variance. He's a guy coming off the Contender Series. He's a guy who, if you watch his fights, he doesn't shy away from an exchange. Like Joe Pyfer is willing to get in there and slug it out. I think he's got the better chin. I think he's the better submission grappler. I think he's the better wrestler. I think he's a little bit better at boxing and kickboxing. So I just think he's better everywhere, and I think he's going to win the fight. I do think this was a setup by the UFC, but I think that, when I looked at the fight, when I looked at the lines, plus 550 was the price on Joe Pyfer to win by sub. The fight to end by sub was plus 500. For 50 cents a difference, I was willing to hedge. So I put half a unit on Joe Pyfer to win by sub, and I put half a unit on the fight to end by sub. Alan Amadovski has no wins by submission, but the only loss inside the distance for Joe Pyfer was a loss by submission. So that was interesting to me. He obviously had the arm break, but that seems kind of meme-ish, like not very repeatable over time. So I think that for me, I really like Joe Pyfer. I think he's going to win the fight. And I kind of like the round 2. Everybody's been looking at the round 1 prop, and a lot of people have bet it, but it's still sitting at like short plus money, maybe minus 105, minus 110. And for me, that was kind of indicative of the fact that books might be leaning towards, maybe they get to starts round 2. Maybe it still goes under 1.5, but I could see definitely, this fight extending to the second round. I believe 4 finishes for Joe Pyfer have come in round 2 in his career. And I think that, especially when I've seen these improvements since he went to Martinez BJJ, I think his flow is a lot better in the wrestling and the grappling phases. And I'm hopeful that he's going to get after it in those positions. So shout out to my man Gordo, Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Make sure you guys go support. Been out there grinding on the Contender Series, got back on the winning track this week. So yeah, just excited to keep the ball rolling forward and appreciate everybody in the chat. Now, next up, we've got a fight between Bill Algeo and Andre Touchy-Feely. Hooey. This is one of the hardest fights for me to call, right? I started putting on my Colombo rain jacket and doing some detective work, shout out Chael Sonnen, but started doing some detective work on this fight because I thought to myself, why are they offering Bill Algeo, who seems to be the public side? Seems like everybody's loving to play Bill Algeo this week. Why are they giving him plus money? Why are they holding at plus money? Why are they not flipping this line? And he actually opened minus 160, right? So Bill Algeo opens a favorite, and then whatever happens in the early market, they decide, no, we're got to book Feely as the favorite here. And we've got to, we're going to put plus money by Bill Algeo. So that tells me they were probably getting only Feely bets early. Now, the problem is I have been noticing a regression, a slowing down, a worsening of performance in Feely for a while. And my only 2 bets ever on an Andre Feely fight are Bryce Mitchell against Andre Feely and Joe Anderson Brito, 4 units at plus 250 and the inside the distance at plus 1,000, right? Because I was thinking to myself, this guy's got huge power. He's got better submission grappling and submission upside. So why wouldn't he win this fight? Why couldn't he win it inside the distance? Bill is a lot less dangerous than Joe Anderson Brito. He doesn't bring that same level of power. He doesn't bring that same pop on his punches, his strikes. His takedowns aren't as good. His submission grappling isn't as lethal. So those are the problems that I'm having with the Bill Algeo side. That being said, somebody's talking about it. My man MMA Triple J, shout out. He says, Senor Perfecto, Pennsylvania stand up. There's a lot of guys from Pennsylvania on this card. Anybody else notice that? There's a lot of guys from CFFC on this card. Anybody else notice that? A lot of guys from LFA on this card. A lot of guys from the Dana White Contender Series on this card. I'm noticing a theme, right? It seems like they are trying to build up a bunch of their in-house fighters, like the guys that they help build, the guys they help promote, the guys that fight on UFC Fight Pass. Like that's what it feels like to me for this card. And so that would speak to the Bill Algeo side. But then the market's telling me another story, which is I had been looking at splits and I'm seeing the splits are basically, very heavily leaning towards Algeo. And one of the things that I envision, right, is that what are people looking to do, right? They look to parlay to get to plus money. Shout out to my man, Library. He's talked about this many times, but that's something that people really do. And there's nothing wrong with that. But then you have to approach the market and say, books are aware of that. So if something gives me perfect plus money, that's interesting, right? I have to ask some questions. Hey, what's going on here? If something doesn't give me plus money, I also should find that interesting, right? And if you think Pat Sabatini wins, right, and he's a favorite from Pennsylvania out of Martinez BJJ, right? If you parlayed that up with Joe Pyfer, best available odds, you're not getting plus money. I thought that was very interesting. You add Bill Algeo, you're getting plus 256. I've heard a few people say, I'm on the Pennsylvania parlay this week. I'm on, Philly parlay this week. Philly stand up. And I like Philly. It's a great city. I like to go visit. I'm a 76ers fan, right? So it's like, I got my Philly credentials, right? But I think that Andre Fili is probably a little bit more physical, right? That's always been my problem with Bill. That's the reason why I bet Joe Anderson Brito against him. And Brito gassed a little bit, right? But I didn't jump off ship. I knew that Brito was still the goods. That was a UFC debut, these kind of things. I think that the cardio dynamic is similar. I don't think one of these guys is going to blow the other out in terms of cardio. I do think, Bill may be slight edge in cardio, maybe ever so slight. The thing that I didn't like on the Feely side is the lack of focus. He's in a band now. He's in movies now. He's doing this. I don't like any of that. So for me, this is a pass right now. Unless I see more clear information in the market, unless, I have just like a gut feeling that creeps into my stomach as the fight's approaching, I just don't envision betting on this fight because it feels too easy for me to hit that Bill Algeo money line at plus money. But it also, the market's telling me basically that Feely's going to win. Like if I just had to read the market and give an opinion based on that, they're taking a lot of money on Bill Algeo and they're still giving plus money. They're not afraid of it. So that for me is scary. And as of now, it's going to keep me off of betting this fight. Next up, guys, we got the co-main event of the evening. So just want to say shout out. We got 143 people rocking with us live right now. Appreciate each and every one of you guys. Going to get you out of here before 3:45, no doubt. But just want to hustle through this main and co-main event. And we're going to do that right after a short message from our friends at Oddsjam. So shout out to our friends at Oddsjam and check this out.
You can make money sports betting, big profits, sports betting, big wins. And the way to do it is positive EV betting. Of course, I'm not promising you're going to win every single bet. But when you're finding bets with a mathematical edge, such as Steelers plus 2.5 at plus 100, when the sharpest sports books are pricing it at minus 115, you're guaranteed to make money in the long run due to the law of large numbers. Here's another one. Twins Royals. Over 4.5, minus 105 odds. You got to be on this bet. Look at this. Two sharpest sports books are pricing this minus 130, minus 123. This is a true pricing discrepancy. We're essentially finding a bet on sale. You're getting insane value at minus 105 odds, so this bet has a 3.84% profit margin. If you're actually trying to become a sharp, profitable sports bettor and make a lot of money betting on sports, you need to be finding positive EV bets, bets with an edge, positive EV bets that have a mathematical edge over the sports book, and place as many as you can. You're basically forming your own hedge fund of mathematically profitable bets.
Now, guys, just want to say off the rip, right? The way that this applies to what we're talking about is the fact that earlier this week, I bet, and I told a bunch of other people that I work with that I was betting on Joe Pyfer to win by sub. At the time, the best available price was plus 550. So I hit that. Now that price is plus 500, best available on the market, as far as I'm aware, right? Fight to end by sub. At the time I hit it, it was a huge pricing discrepancy there's two books that really price that out a lot of the time, right? DraftKings and FanDuel. DraftKings was holding a plus 380, plus 470, plus 500 on FanDuel. At that point, it was a no-brainer. So for me, these are the kind of things where it's not going to work every time, but I want to get some closing line value. I want to see the market support the bets that I'm making. And when a price goes from being on the market to completely off the market by 100 points, 150 points, 200 points, that's normally a sign of strength. So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for. And shout out to our friends at Oddsjam for their support of the program. But we got the co-main event, guys. Chidi Njokuani. He burst on the scene, man. I bet him as an underdog against Mario Souza. Look how that turned out. I mean, guys, last time against Aliskerov, you have to lay the -5xx, right? But Chidi Njokuani was had as an underdog against this guy. If you guys watch the tape, you know that Chidi absolutely ran through him, with all due respect, really had his way with him. On the feet, it was actually much more competitive. It was on the ground that Chidi just ran away with that fight. Kind of showed off those improvements, that black belt that he's been working on. So Chidi's definitely made improvements. That being said, I bet against Gregory Robocop Rodrigues his last time out, and I felt very fortunate that I cashed that ticket. Now, granted, split decision type fight, very close, could go either way. I was on the underdog, right? So I'm not kicking myself for the bet, but I did make mental note. Wow, this guy, Gregory Rodrigues, definitely has some upside in the division if that chin's able to hold up, My man 2 Cents says Chidi banks here, and that's the issue, right? I do have some concerns about the striking defense and the striking choices of Gregory Rodrigues, because he is a son of a gun, man. He gets in there and swings. He gets in there and fights. But he also mixes in that grappling at times. And we have seen Chidi struggle. When guys start to mix in the wrestling, start to mix in the grappling, it can wear on his gas tank. He has the coolest voice in the world. You'll see a lot of people talking about that on Twitter and all these things. It also sounds like he smokes a pack a day of cigarettes. Like the guy kind of has like that really gravelly voice. And I'm sure he trains hard, but we have seen him slow down a little bit in the past in some of his fights, especially when they're grappling heavy. Bellator, that was like the hallmark of some of his later fights, unfortunately, at the higher level. And so this is a fight that could go either way. It's a fight that's being priced very closely and accordingly. But I actually lean towards the underdog here as the fight week goes on. I just think he's got a couple more paths to victory. I think he could mix in the takedowns, the wrestling, the grappling, and find an advantage in that sense, where maybe he doesn't even look for the submission, but he's able to get a dominant position, unload with some strikes, pass the mount, and get the TKO. So I like Gregory Rodrigues here ever so slightly. It's a hell of a scrap. Another fight where a lot of people are going to be targeting violence. I can't blame you at all. If I find the right price on a fight not to go the distance, maybe I get involved too. I think it's going to be a heck of a scrap. And I can see either man getting it done in the very first round. So with that being said, just want to shout out our friends at Oddsjam. Right now, the best available price on Chidi Njokuani can be had on FanDuel Sportsbook. It's -128. And you're seeing around +110, +113 as the best available comeback on multiple books on Gregory Robocop Rodrigues. Now, final fight of the evening, guys. Hell of a fight. Hell of a fight. Hell of a division. If you guys go back and watch, me and Dan Levy did a show like future predictions, for what was going to happen in the year. And I had a couple predictions that didn't age like milk. I'll say that. One of them was that, Valentina Shevchenko was going to lose that belt to some of the challengers coming up in the division. And I cited Talia Santos. We got ever so close, couldn't quite get that one over the hump. But I also said, I think this is the year that Song Yadong breaks into that top 10 in the bantamweight division. I said I thought he was going to take Marlon Moraes out of there in devastating fashion, and he did just that. I bet a lot of money, a lot of coin on Song Yadong as the method markets were opening there, because I knew they were going to run away. I knew they were going to end up at chalk odds, and saw +125, +130 on Song Yadong to win by knockout against Marlon Moraes. At that point, I just thought it was a must-bet opportunity. Here, much different scenario. Cory Sandhagen, not known for having a very suspect chin, not known for being a quitter, not known for not being able to take damage. He is a very, very tough guy, man. He is an extremely game opponent. You go back and look, guys have had him in extremely tight submission attempts. He goes to sleep, against Algeo. But when you don't have him in a submission where he's going to sleep, you got to break his arm. You got to really finish him. Like Yuri Alcantara had his arm in all sorts of trouble, had him in deep submission attempts, and this man's fighting to the bitter, bitter end. I love that about him. Then you see against Petr Yan, he's clearly outgunned as the fight's going on. He's clearly a little bit outthought, outskilled. and he stayed in the pocket. He kept swinging. He kept pursuing victory. Maybe he didn't get the win, but Cory Sandhagen goes out there and fights like a dog every time. And, the Algeo fight, he came out a little flat. I don't think we've seen that from him since, where he just comes out and doesn't really bring that, intensity. He brought a lot of intensity to his fights since the Algeo fight. And, I thought that the TJ fight was just a little complacent. To be honest with you, I was agreeing with Cory. I thought he was clearly winning the fight. I thought that TJ was holding on for dear life at various points. I thought that he got submitted. I thought he yelped out in pain when he was in that, heel hook attempt. His knee gave out. I wouldn't have been surprised if a different referee stopped that. You can't yell out in pain when you're in submission attempts. Same thing with Tony Ferguson on rewatch. He yelled out in pain in that Beneil Dariush heel hook attempt. That probably should have been stopped. But either way, I think that when I watch Cory Sandhagen, man, I see a guy who's operating on multiple levels. I see a guy who's extremely intelligent, and he's well-schooled. He's fought a lot of tough guys. He's been around for a very long time. And I'm talking about at the high levels of MMA. He's been fighting credible guys. He's an LFA guy as well. Very credible history with that organization. Didn't come in as the biggest prospect to the UFC, but people knew who he was and they knew he was talented. And he's gotten a lot of devastating finishes. He's submitted people in the UFC. And if you're a newer UFC fan, maybe you don't have these memories, but I would encourage you guys, go back and watch, because he's been in dicey situations and fought through. He's fought really tough, credible strikers like John Lineker and gotten the win. And that was a 3-round contest. This is a 5-round contest where he's got more time to work, more time to tire this guy out, and potentially draw him onto a shot. And so Song Yadong is a guy that I truly think has championship upside. But he's 24 years old. He's being asked to make a big step up in competition here, from a guy who had very little left to give in the octagon, to a guy that I think has a ton left to give and could really challenge for a title still in the future, in Cory Sandhagen. So I think this is going to be a little bit of a timing issue for Song Yadong. I think he's here a little too early, and I think this is going to be great main event experience. I think he's going to get a couple good rounds in here with Cory, but I just have a feeling that Cory Sandhagen is going to enter the matrix once again with that flying knee, because Song Yadong dips his head in the pocket. He likes to level change and roll as he's coming inside. And Cory Sandhagen did that exact thing to Frankie Edgar, where he created angles, cut backwards, forced him on, forced Frankie to come onto him, and then flew with the knee. And Frankie never saw it coming. I don't know that Song Yadong is going to see it coming. I do think that this is going to be a hell of a fight. I think it's going to be a great scrap while it lasts. I think Song Yadong is a pressure fighter. I think he's going to bring some intensity. I just don't think he has what it takes right now to beat Cory Sandhagen, who I think is extremely talented in all positions. I think he's just one step further along in this MMA journey. I think Song Yadong will be back. I think he could definitely beat guys in this top 10 right now. I think this is the wrong matchup for him. I think this is a matchup for Cory Sandhagen. I think we're going to enter Sandman once again, flying knee knockout. That's how I'm calling it. And I'm excited to see what you guys think. So if you guys are taking action with me, if you're going the other way, drop a comment below this video. Let me know what you're rocking with. I'll try and answer everybody here as we get started, but the fights are about to break out. I just wish that all you guys have an absolutely excellent fight card. I hope that you guys have a great weekend. There's a lot of college football. There's ADCCs. There's the Wrestling World Championship. And there's really a lot to dig into. If you're a combat sports fan, you're getting blessed. So Canelo Alvarez fight night as well, least I forget. If you're a boxing head, just endless content, lot to dig into. I can't wait to break it all down with you guys. So thank you for your intention. Thank you for your effort. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Sharpest chat in the game. Truly believe that. And let's get this money. Good luck to everybody on your bets. God bless you all. Come back next weekend. We're going to have all the same fun again. Take care, everybody.